Okay, so now let's talk about ejections and that process that of our brains and what we go through leading up to ejections or not, based on how we handle situations. So we kind of do that stoplight. The first thing we do is we learn what is rabbit ears on the field and what we just completely ignore, that we just goes under the radar. Those are totally non-offensive. They're just minor grumblings in the dugout here and there, but nothing directed at us, nothing repetitive, nothing other people hear. That's when we say, don't go looking for things, right? That's the kind of ignore phase that sometimes people are just going to be unhappy and just let them be. But then we move into the phase where we have to actually acknowledge something is being said and start the process of what are we going to do about this. So we call it the stoplight. And the first phase of the stoplight, Troy, is what?
That's enough. So in a situation where, we've maybe had some chatter about the strike zone earlier on in the game, but nothing serious, nothing that you've acknowledged, but now something comes specifically directed to you about a pitch that, they thought that you got wrong.
So I would say something like, all right, I heard that, right? I've acknowledged, I haven't let it go, but I let him know, oh, that actually caught my attention, and I'm letting you know that I heard you. I heard that.
Absolutely. The worst thing that you can do with a manager or a coach is completely ignore them. So, in fact, you may be able to deflate the situation or lower the intensity by just this acknowledgement as opposed to ignoring them, which will infuriate them more.
Right. So the next phase that we have is we actually need to warn somebody now. Not need to, choose to, because there are situations where we don't give any warnings, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So the next phase, so I've already done, Troy, I've already said, hey, I heard that. What happens if the next pitch I hear him again? Am I going to let that go?
Absolutely not. If it's the same situation, then as we know by rule, we can't argue balls and strikes. So at this point in time, it's going to be loud enough for everybody to hear, or most people to hear. So at that point, I'm going to acknowledge, probably take off my mask. That's how I prefer to do it. But you don't have to do it in an aggressive manner. And also, you don't necessarily have to step towards them, because what does that look like? It looks like you're being the aggressor. So take your mask off and acknowledge, but at that point, okay, coach, that's enough.
Perfect. So unfortunately for some coaches, that's not enough. And there's one more offense, and in which case we're not going to give them the foothold. Once we get to that absolute red light, we've given you an acknowledgement, we've given you a warning, and now you're going to do it again. You're going to say, you're done. Okay? So that ejection happens under routine circumstances in a situation like what we were just talking about. So we're going to go right now to a clip that absolutely exemplifies everything that we just talked about, but at a much higher level than where we work. This is when Stu Sherwater, our Canadian MLB umpire, was working in back in 2017, and he had an opportunity in a game with the Yankees where Joe Girardi was giving him some flack, and Aaron Judge is at bat. And let's watch and see what Stu does here, and then we're going to come back and talk about the professionalism. So let's go have a look at that.
Strike on the outside corner.
Hey, no more! I heard you! You're not going to argue.
Yeah, this is Joe Girardi. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just should be looking at the next pitch. And again, I didn't want to just continually say the same thing, but that ball looks like it's off the outside plate too.
Well, Sherwater had said, all right, I heard you, and then Joe kept talking, and he threw it out. One of the younger umpires in the major leagues.
I truly would like to get into the head of a veteran umpire and know what they feel at this point, whether they really care, that they just threw the manager out, or if it's just part of the game.
All right, what a great clip. Literally everything that we just talked about. So the first thing that happened was Stu looked at Girardi when he started talking in the dugout and said something like, hey.
Acknowledged the manager that he heard
you,
what he had to say, and that was inappropriate.
Wasn't even before the next pitch, and it appears that the Jordy's going to come out of the dugout. Well, we know by the rule book that you shall not leave your position to argue balls and strikes. He takes his mask off. What he did do, I don't know if you noticed, was he put his hand up to stop the pitcher from delivering the ball, because as an umpire, we should never be turning our face sideways and dealing with somebody else while the pitcher is in their windup. So that's a really important point that Stu handled there. Is once he realized he had to engage the coach, he put up his hand, and you'll see in the video clip that the pitcher stepped back off the rubber and knew that something was coming because he had done this, and then he removed his mask, and he ejected him immediately because he proceeded out of the dugout to come at him while he said, "You're not coming out here to argue balls and strikes." So what a great example of composure. And then what did he do after that?
Absolutely. No, I mean, he really did a great job of de-escalating. You'll notice that he stood there and let the manager basically air out, and just took it all in. And really, that's a great way to show how we can de-escalate situations as well, as opposed to raising our voice in tune with the manager or the coach. If we remain calm, quite often that coach or manager will automatically calm down with us in a short period of time, because they'll realize they're just yelling at themselves. So great work by Stu, and really, I mean, look at him as a Canadian umpire where he is today. And certainly that's something that you as young umpires can aspire to as well.
So now we want to talk about things that are not going to get a warning. All right, so there are some things that can happen on a field that are not going to walk through the stoplight process that we just talked about. Profanity is one of them. We do not allow people to use bad language on the field. Minor baseball is not the place for that. It can be a coach or a player. We just don't allow it. If anybody else can hear what was said, that is an ejectable offense. So know the difference between, a runner being out at first on a close play and muttering something under his breath that nobody hears, but maybe only you because you're standing right there, and somebody saying something loud enough for other players or fans to hear out loud with the use of profanity. We're going to eject for that right away. Making things personal. So there's a difference between someone saying, "Boy, that was terrible," and "Boy, Rhonda, you're terrible." So we need to understand that insulting us personally is not something that umpires have to put up with on a field, and that's ejectable right away. So if you hear the words "you" or "your name" used in conjunction with negative comments like that, that would be considered ejectable without a warning. Physical contact. There's a couple different ways that can happen. Player to player contact. Quite often, I know a hard slide goes bad into second base, and the fielder and the base runner end up shoving each other and having an altercation, something like that. We would not give a warning. That is against the rules of baseball, and we would eject those players for that kind of conduct. The other kind of contact that we see sometimes, not very often, thankfully, is between a manager and a coach, where something is escalated and maybe physical contact is made with the umpire. Their arm is grabbed, or they might be poked or pushed in some way, just as, trying to get their attention, or, whatever. That isn't something that we would give a warning about either. If you are ever physically contacted by a coach in an aggressive way in anger, we would eject for that. Malicious contact is different. That's when you have a player intentionally making contact with another player, seemingly to hurt them. So that would be, cleats up, coming in on a slide, or a runner coming in from third, dropping their shoulder and running a catcher. People can get hurt. So those kind of things, we want to have a really strong message. We don't warn, we eject immediately for malicious contact. Intentionally throwing out a batter. We have an option, according to the rule book, to warn the pitcher, manager on both sides when we have an incident, or if we think the situation warrants it, without a warning, we can eject for a first offense. So that's a discretionary rule. And so you need to read up on that and think about it in that situation, but you have the option to automatically eject if you believe the situation warrants that. Throwing of equipment. player's angry, they struck out and they pick up their bat and throw it up against the backstop or take their helmet off and spike it down on the ground. That is something that we are told is not good for baseball, and we don't let kids do that. We don't let adults do that. So we would eject for that. And the only caution that I would give you around that is if a coach or manager is really doing their job and they see a player do something like that, if they come out and deal with it right away, they get on their player and they put him on the bench and you hear him, angry with them for the conduct, I'm inclined to let the manager deal with that, because that's a really effective way for a coach to deal with his own player. It's only when managers don't deal with that behavior that we actually have to. Okay, so keep that in mind. And the last big obvious one that we want to talk about here is showing you up. What does that mean? Anytime a player or a manager does something to draw negative attention to you, to let everybody in the park know they think you're wrong, is considered showing up. So that would be a batter. After a strike call he doesn't agree with, he draws a line in the sand to show everybody else out there, hey, this was, in the batter's box, and she called it a strike. That's showing me up. I eject you for that. A manager coming out waving their arms and kicks dirt on the plate because he's not happy, or starts motioning to where a tag did or didn't happen, implying maybe that you didn't see it or something like that. That would be gestures that we wouldn't allow him to do or her to do with a warning. That would just be an automatic ejection in that situation. All right, a little bit about de-escalation strategies. The best thing that you can do before you've ever had a problem in a game is actually build a little bit of a rapport with the catcher. We talked about this a little bit earlier in one of the rules sessions, but the importance of this, if you ever have situations in the game, will come to bear fruit for you if you do your homework. Give them your name, develop a little bit of a relationship, talk a little bit throughout the game about some things that happen so that when you need to call on that catcher, that you can, okay? Sweeping the plate gives you an opportunity to address the catcher and or the batter or both of them without anybody really knowing what you're saying. So if I have a pitcher, for example, that's not getting strike calls, but he thinks that he should, and I can tell that he's getting rattled up there, but he's just not hitting the spot and I can't give it to him, but I want him to calm down. Quite often when I'm sweeping the plate, I can say to the catcher, hey, do you want to just go talk to your pitcher and see if you can, calm him down? Tell him we're working hard back here and just to keep throwing the ball. He's doing a good job, or whatever you want to say. Or maybe it's the batter. Maybe the batter is having words with the catcher and it's being antagonistic, and you call time and sweep the plate and say, hey, we're not going to have that. There's no verbal interactions needed. You hit, you catch. Let's go. Right? And you can kind of shut stuff down. Nobody hears you. You've got the dirt circle all to yourself. So that's kind of your own little opportunity to manage situations right there. Using first names, we talked about this earlier with coaches, especially with coaches. It's a sign of relationship. Instead of saying, hey, coach, or hey, Blue, I know your name. I'm going to address you by your name. There's a level of respect there when we do that, and it warrants attention. If we have a heated situation and I know that I know this coach, and instead of him saying, hey, Rhonda, what's going on here? He's like, hey, Blue. It's actually a little bit offensive because they know my name, and it's like a slur. It's like something that they shouldn't do, is, call me that when they know what my name is. So we want to make sure we use their names as well. Okay. Common approachable body language. That's why I put this picture of Stu while Joe is going off on him as a still shot from the video that we watched. Stu did nothing, as we mentioned, to escalate that situation. How Troy talked about, he just brought it down by letting Joe have his piece, and then away he went. He'd already been ejected. He was not in danger of prolonged arguing because he, packed up his suitcase and left. So he's done what he needs to do, and Stu turns around and walks back, and he's unruffled. So he definitely calmed that situation by just being calm and approachable with an open body language in that situation. Okay, so those are just some helpful things for you to keep in mind that will come in handy through the course of your games.
Record an ejection. We're going to go to the BCBOA website. We're going to go to member sign in, and we're going to enter in your member ID and your password, and then that'll bring up a public area. And I've got a few extra things here on mine that you wouldn't have on yours, but you would be under your area here, and then you go down to ejection or incident reports. And I will go over to add ejections. And then working through, we would select a league. And for the purpose of our level of baseball, we're going to be BC minor baseball for the most part. And we will click that, and then the division. Let's have this as 11U. And the date, and today's date is April the 17th. And it's the first game that I've done this between these two teams. And we would enter the home team, and I'm going to put that it is White Rock versus Ladner, and we're going to be playing at South Surrey. I'll put my name, and I was doing the plate, and my partner, we'll pick a partner, and I'm going to pick Paul's. And oh look, there's Rhonda Paul's. I'm working the game with our BCBUA president. And I have ejected the coach, and off of the lineup sheet I can see that the coach's name is Joe Smith. And they were the manager of the team, and well, I'll put it as the away team as Ladner, because that's one of the associations I deal with. This is hypothetical. Sure, it wouldn't happen. And then I'm going to put down the details. And I need to paint a picture here. So I'm going to put down what inning it was, and in the top of the third inning, the manager, Joe Smith, made a comment to me about an inconsistent strike zone. I told him that it was inappropriate and that I had warned him at the plate meeting, so I ejected him. And then I'm also going to put that there was no further incidents during the game. And basically what that says is that he left the game after I ejected him, and that I had no problems with the team following the game. And just for the purpose of this, I am going to put this is a test for instructional purpose. Only because this is going to get sent into a database, and because I'm live on this, and then I would hit submit the ejection. And then I would get an email, and Rhonda would get an email, and the representative from BC Minor Baseball will get an email, and the person for BCBUA who looks after ejections gets that email as well. So that's the process. Pretty simple for doing a ejection report. Follow the prompts. When you get to the description, paint the picture, and tell them what was going on, and there you got it.